All right. Well, we are picking up in I Am That by Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. We're on chapter 37, Beyond Pain and Pleasure, There is Bliss. And I just listened to a wonderful Alan Watts 10-minute lecture on pleasure and pain this morning as I was sitting here kind of waiting for time to nudge me. And, the fact that pain and pleasure come from the same place, and it's attachment that turns our pleasure into pain, because we have this idea of anytime we experience happiness or anytime we experience joy or pleasure, we want it to be permanent. And that desire for permanence in things is attachment. That's what attachment does. And it kills the bliss, it kills the joy, it kills the happiness. The example that he used was absolutely wonderful. A mother took her very young daughter to the pet store and bought her a little pet rabbit. And the little girl had wanted it for so long and was so overjoyed and outrageously happy about having the rabbit. And she was holding it in the car on the way home, but was holding it so tight and with so much love that the rabbit died in her arms because she held onto it too tightly. And you see, that's attachment, and that's the effect of attachment in our lives. When we hold on too tightly to the things that we love, that we're enjoying, that are pleasurable to us, we kill them. Because we want them to be, that we want them to be permanent. And so that desire and the fear of losing them and the fear of it not being that way causes us to clutch tighter. And we clutch so tight that we actually change the experience from joy to sadness, from pleasure to pain. And so we're going to be taking a closer look at all of this. Maharaj starts off just by telling us, you must realize, first of all, that you are the proof of everything, including yourself, right? This is the one thing, if you sit and think for a moment, and as you know, I like these thought exercises, the thought exercise that kind of helped me kind of move into understanding this more deeply. I sat in the shrine one day in San Francisco and tried to think of any one thing that I knew that didn't depend on anything else that I knew, right? So what was the fundamental things that I knew where I didn't have to know other things in order to see the truth of it, that it was independent? And there's only one thing that I could come up with, and it took me quite a while to actually understand it or to actually come up with it. And that is really just the I am, my own existence. The fact that I exist, that I am, is the only thing that I know for certain. For certain, I did a Bengali certain. So the fact that I am is the only thing that we can know that isn't dependent on anything else that we know. It's the fundamental piece, and it might be the only piece, the only thing that we actually know, right? So it's what he's saying here, and this is the first thing that you have to realize. This is the place to start, and not only is it the place to start, it's the place that you end on, because you realize that no matter what else you know in this world, it's going to be dependent on the I am, right? That's the one thought upon which everything is built, and all manner of manifestation is built on that one thing. So he's saying this is the first realization you have to have, that you are the proof of everything, including the self, yourself. None can prove your existence, because his existence must be confirmed by you first. Your being and knowing you owe nobody. Remember, you are entirely on your own. You do not come from somewhere. You do not go anywhere. You are timeless being and awareness. And this is very interesting, this idea of our being. This is because it if you meditate on it, And if you think deeply about it, it's releases you from attachment, because the one thing that will always be true is you are, I am. And all the things that you've hung on that are always with you. And so if you think that, you know, if that going on vacation is going to make you somehow different, all you have to do is remember wherever you are, there you are. So the same I am that is here is going to be the same I am that is there. And that's going to be the same. I often imagine myself in let me just do something here real quick. That if we, no matter where you are, if you imagine yourself in the deep dark of space in a spacesuit where there's nothing at all around you, what is still there? The I am. And actually, in a situation like that, if you contemplate that situation, place yourself in a spacesuit in the middle of space where there is nothing around you, not a single person for bazillions of miles, not a planet, not a house, not a dollar bill, not a job, not an internet. There is nothing around you for millions and millions and millions of miles. What will you have? Right? What will you have? You'll have the I am. And with that I am, what will be your purpose? What purpose would you have if you were floating in the middle of space with nothing for billions of miles around you? Right? What would your experience of life be? That would be the purest existence. Right? That would be the purest existence. And so it's a very interesting one to contemplate, because it kind of undoes all of the other things in our minds. You wouldn't have any relationships to be responsible to. You wouldn't have any tasks that had to be done. You wouldn't have, there would be nowhere to go. There would be no job. There'd be no money. There would just be isness in this vast, vast emptiness. And so it's an interesting thing to contemplate, because it's the purest laboratory you could get for asking yourself, what is the point? What is the point in that? And so he's saying, no, this is the ultimate of our reality, the very most fundamental thing to our being. And it's yours by nature. You owe it to nobody. It comes from nobody. It's you. It's your isness, and it's forever, and it's outside of time, and it's always there. Just a moment. So he tells us, what do we know at that point? He says you don't come from somewhere, right? So that's number one, and you're not going anywhere. You are timeless being, and you are timeless awareness. Right? Timeless being and timeless awareness. And so in that situation, you could have no purpose but being and awareness. Right? So you could sit there and you could watch the vast stars, and you know that you don't affect them. You just are aware of them, and that your awareness goes as far as the senses can reach on the external, and then vastly even further within. The questioner says, well, there is a basic difference between us. You know the real, why I only know the workings of my mind. Therefore, what you say is one thing, and what I hear is another. This is actually very insightful. This must be a different questioner here. I know only the workings of my mind. That is exactly right. That is exactly right. And if you do the exercise that we just talked about, it will show you how much of your experience of being is the workings of your mind, right? Because how much of the noise in your mind would simply disappear or never have developed if you were in that spaceship or in that spacesuit in the middle of the expanse of the universe, billions of miles from anything. So very different. He's got a very good point here. And he says that what you're going to say one thing and I'm going to hear another, right? We've talked about why that is, because all I can give you is words. All Maharaj can give us is words. And we read those words. And what do we put? How do we understand those words? We only understand those words because of the contents of our mind. Whatever we've put on in our mind is what gives us the understanding of the words that come to us. And so if we have not been putting pure things into the mind, if we have not been putting true things, lasting things, wise things into our mind, then we're going to have to use all of that detritus, all that trash, to understand words. And when somebody's giving us purely holy words, like a realized soul, we don't get the purity of them, right? Because we haven't done the practice, we haven't done the work of sorting through what is me and mine, and what is true, what is unchanging, and what is real within ourselves. And without that understanding, scripture becomes very difficult to understand. So that's something people quite often say. They'll find a great teacher and they'll be like, oh my gosh, how did he see that? Or, I read that scripture too, and I never saw that there before. Well, it's because we didn't have this inside cleared out, so we couldn't see, right? We couldn't see. That's why Jesus used to begin all of his parables with that statement: he who has eyes to see, let him see. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. And so be careful of your instrument, the instrument of your mind. Your mind, when it is pure, is God, is Brahman, right? What have we done with Brahman that we can't even see him when it is the mind alone that we're using for everything? So the basic difference between us, the real, while I know only the workings of my mind. Therefore, what you say is one thing, and what I hear is another. What you say is true. What I understand is false. Oh my God, what marvelous! This is marvelous. I'm so surprised this is coming from our questioner, right? What I understand is false, though the words are the same. There is a gap between us. How to close that gap? That's a marvelous question. And I have always wondered that, because I've shared with you my experience with Moksha Prana, and in that experience that I had with Moksha Prana, she didn't give me words. She gave me the thing itself. It's like, yes, they were words. Everybody else would have heard words. I heard words, but the words didn't have to be interpreted. I didn't have to project my own mind onto those words to understand them. When she told them to me, and of course, as you know, in that experience with her, there were only 2 words. She just said, it's okay. That's all she said. But with those 2 words came all of the understanding of her entire practice, her entire being. And I knew those 2 words as soon as they came into me. I knew them, not understood them, because that's a process. There was no process. She gave me, it's okay. Literally gave me, it's okay. Not just words of it's okay. She gave me the it's okay itself, right? And so I knew I had this deep, full comprehension all the way down to the bottom of my being that it's okay. And for me at that time in my life, I had a complete collapse. I mean, because there was so much fear so deep inside. There was so much shame so deep inside, so much grief so deep inside, so much anxiety deep inside, just being alive at that time. And all of that just completely, literally collapsed in on itself, left me a disheveled heap of wonder and grace at that moment. Right? So there is a gap between us, and how do we close that gap? Right? And we know Sri Ramakrishna says the only thing that causes that gap is the idea of me and mine, right? That idea of being separate from the whole, being separate from God. Maharaj says, give up the idea of being what you think yourself to be. Remember, we talked about that. When you're living as the thought of yourself, right? And you can always know because the thought of yourself is always described from the outside in, always from the outside, looking at attributes. Whenever you're dealing with, I'm a man, I'm 60, I'm unhealthy, I'm whatever you're using to describe yourself. If you are describing yourself, you are in this state of not knowing. You're in this state of living as the thought of you, right? And so you're being you. And that sounds like it's fine, but there's one more step. You've got to stop being you and just start simply being, with no definition, with no history, with no future, just being. So give up the idea of being what you think yourself to be, and there will be no gap, because being has no description from the outside in. There's no narrative, there's no story to it. Being is coming from the inside out. And if you've done that homework that we talked about quite a few months ago, to try and describe yourself from the inside out instead of the outside in, because that's what Maharaj says is the difference between an enlightened soul and a deluded soul, is that an enlightened soul describes himself from the inside out, right? So he does not see a sufferer, he suffers, right? He knows himself to be that, because he doesn't have those boundaries that come when we live as the thought of ourself with all of the descriptions from the outside in. So give up the idea of being what you think yourself to be, and there will be no gap. By imagining yourself as separate, you have created the gap. Right? It's you that has made yourself separate from the world. It's you that has decided those are your neighbor's problems. These are my problems. Instead of the much more beautiful idea of these are our problems, right? That's the middle step. These are our problems. In the end, that moves toward your problems are my problems. If you're not taken care of, I'm not taken care of, right? And so that's how we expand our heart, and that is what the point of spiritual practice, and that's the point of being a householder, is this expansion of ourself. The divine built that into the practice of being a householder. You grow up, at first it's family, and you're taught that you're not independent in the family. You've got a family, the mom and dad, they have to be respected, they have to be served, and brothers and sisters, they have to be taken care of, and the chores have to be done, and the household has to be maintained. So it's not just you and yours. There's an expansion to ours in that, and it continues on through life. In the beginning, we're given space to just be children, to me and mine. We're taught the principles, but then when you get married, you now have two people. You can't live a life of me and mine anymore. And if you try that in a marriage, you don't have a good one, right? And so the marriage has to be an us thing, a give and a take on the parts of each other. I don't know much, I haven't seen much about the ideals of marriage in Hindu scripture, actually. At least indirectly they're implied. But, in the Christian scripture, and I think it's in Corinthians, they talk about the fact that between husband and wife, the ideal is that there's oneness there. And then what he says is that the wife's body does not belong to the wife, but to the husband. And the husband's body does not belong to the husband, but belongs to the wife. And at first you think that it's like, oh my God, what are you talking about? That's codependent. This is terrible. But if it's healthy, which means that the marriage is based on love, that's wonderful, because that means the husband will take care of the wife's body as if it was his own, because he doesn't have one of his own. And the wife will take care of his body and his needs as her own, because she doesn't have her own. They've given each other ownership of themselves. And the trust that has to be there in order for that to work and to be healthy is intense and takes a lifetime of practice. And so that's how you know that marriage is blessed and sacred, because it's your practice of developing trust in the other to be, and your trust, building that trust by your own part in taking care of your other, which is yourself now, because when you've given yourself to your husband or your wife, you don't have one to keep for yourself. And when they give it to you, the same. You see, so we grow in that trust. We lose that sense of separateness. We practice just that relationship itself becomes the practice of breaking down otherness, getting rid of the idea of other, and learning what unity feels and looks like when it's confronted by the only thing that is left when you give away yourself, the Satchitananda, right? The principle of being, love and wisdom. And so he goes on, he says, by imagining yourself as separate, you have created the gap. You need not cross it, just don't create it. All right? You don't have to cross this gap. Just don't let a gap be created by you, right? And how do we resist creating that gap between us? If we take that marriage example, don't be selfish. That's how you stop that gap from developing. Don't sit there and think, in this country in particular, my goodness, I don't make a habit. Actually, I have not read through a dating app. I've never read through a dating app, to be honest with you. Those days were already gone for me by the time computers came around. So I've never even seen one of those. But I remember there was a young man in the center in San Francisco. I'm not going to tell his name. But I went downstairs in the basement. He was sitting in front of the computer, and I went over, was standing behind him, and he was going through a Desi dating app on there, and I was just kind of quietly reading all of the ads that he was kind of going up the screen, and I just realized that on dating sites, when people are looking for relationship, they're doomed. Every single one of them are doomed. None of them are going to have a good relationship. Why? Because all of them were looking for something in the other for themselves. Nobody was talking about what they were bringing to the table. No one was talking about, I want somebody, that I can give to, who's there, that I can give a great Christmas to, and that I can wake up next to and share my love with them and, nurture them and make them the best that person they could be, and to be a part of building their life with them. Everybody was talking about what that person was going to do for them. And I thought, no, that violates the very fundamentals of what a loving relationship is, where people are not asking the question all the time, what am I getting out of this marriage? How is this fulfilling me? My needs aren't being met, right? Well, that's because you're spending all of your time defining your needs. They're never going to be met. Now, there are unhealthy marriages out there, and I'm not encouraging an unhealthy thing. I'm encouraging the existence of pure love and our realizing that's who we are. And because we are pure love, we naturally think about other and taking care of other. And a healthy marriage is not one person taking care of the other all the time. A healthy marriage is two people taking care of each other as if they were their own selves, right? And so this is the practice of householdership. This is how householders realize God, is through this practice of manifesting a beautiful marriage based on the exercising of Satchitananda as your motive and the other person as yourself, right? That's how we give up the idea of being what we think ourselves to be, right? Because we're not sitting there thinking and defining ourselves all the time, and there'll be no gap. Don't cross the gap, right? By not being selfish, by not practicing selfishness. That's how you don't create it. All is you and yours, right? Everything is you and yours. So the needs of your family are your needs. The needs of your husband or wife are your needs. The needs of your friends are your needs. And see what a marvelous expansion that is. And if your mind really lived in that space, your joy would be the fruit of that. The joy would happen, bliss would happen, because anytime we express love in a positive way like that without selfishness behind it, bliss is the natural what do you call that? It's not the result, because you're not doing it for that, but it's the byproduct. There it is. That's my word. It's the byproduct of living according to your nature, Satchitananda. A fulfilling life is the byproduct of knowing who you are and living accordingly, right? All is you and all is yours. There is nobody else. And then he puts that nice little ending there. This is a fact. This isn't just a way of living in the world. This isn't just a philosophy of life. This is fact. If you sit and think about things long enough, you will come to this conclusion. It is obvious, and it is presented to you as obvious in the world around you if you stop thinking about yourself first. Thinking about yourself first is going to cloud your mind and make it terribly complex and give you all kinds of attractions and aversions and all kinds of problems. And you're suddenly going to notice how nobody's taking good enough care of you, and the world stinks, and I hate people, and I'm going to go live under a tree. This is not how we get there. So the questioner says, how strange. Indeed. In this world, exactly. What? You're nuts. You're nuts. How strange. The very same words which to you are true, to me are false. There is nobody else. How obviously untrue. What am I seeing then? What am I seeing? There's all these people out there. Who else is there? Right? And this is, how can we see this? This is where I get like a broken record. But it's so important. This is so fundamental to everything I say. So I always come back to these few things. It's just like a dream, brothers and sisters. It's just like a dream. Yes, in the dream, other people seem obvious. The mountains seem obvious. The ocean seems obvious in your dream. But what is it? Come to know that you're dreaming. And then the ocean is made of your very self, not metaphorically. You know that everybody else in your dream is made of yourself, and it's not metaphorically. And we've already talked ad infinitum how this waking world is absolutely no different in its nature than the dream world, right? It's still the same here. There is no difference. And I'm not going to say it again, the whole eye and ear thing and the symbol thing, right? We've already said that how many dozens of times. Just remember it and start to live accordingly. Are you waking up in the morning and touching your bed and realizing this bed is made of mind stuff, is made of Brahman, and it's in the mind of God, because God is a pure mind. That is the nature of God, a pure mind, a mind with no mere mind, that its nature is love and wisdom and being. And that this is not, oh good Lord, I was going to say wood, but there's no doubt that desk is not wood. But that desk isn't plastic either. I don't even know, it doesn't even feel like plastic. I actually haven't thought about what this desk is. But this desk here is not whatever it really is. Even whatever name I gave to it, it wouldn't be true, because this desk is made of the same thing as my forehead. My forehead's made of the same thing as this chair. This chair is made of the same thing as my coffee cup. And the coffee cup's made of the same thing that I'm drinking out of it. It's all Brahman. It's all this magical substance. I don't like to say Brahman because we immediately put that into categories of religion and philosophy that are meaningless to us. Let us just say this is some miraculous mind stuff, because we've never seen it. This is that symbol made by our mind, right? And how does the mind make this symbol for me? What is it using to create a ceramic coffee cup that isn't ceramic or a coffee cup? How does it do that and present it to me, right? What's going on with this like that? And we have to remind ourselves that this is the case. So when you get up in the morning, spend a few moments in love with your divine beloved, understanding that all of this is made of the same material. That's why Thakur tells you, that's the whole point of him saying the clay elephant and the clay mouse, all the gold ornaments, Ramakrishna telling you, all the gold ornaments, no matter what their sizes and shapes are, they're all made of gold. They're all the same substance. And he's using that as metaphor, not because he's stretching something to make gold the same in everything. That's obvious. That's a metaphor because it's the truth for everything. This shirt and jam are made out of the same thing. This shirt and jam. I could pull out a whisker here, and it's the same thing in its essence that a car is. There is no difference between these things. And until we start making that assumption first, we can't be realized. We can't know our nature. We can't know who we are. Right? And so this is what he's trying to teach us here. Get up in the morning. Understand you are made of dream material. Understand that you're sitting on dream material. And all of this material is of the mind of the beloved, right? and that's of the mind of the beloved, which means that it's all a thought of God. And the thoughts of God are motivated when he manifests only by two things, love and wisdom. And they manifest as being, as isness, as this. And so this is what he's trying to tell us. Maharaj, let them be true or untrue. Words don't matter, right? Descriptions don't matter. Talking about things doesn't matter. That's all tertiary. That's so far down the road. Remember when Thakur says that when he's in that state of knowledge, that state of jnana, he says even the word Om is miles below him. You know, that he has to bring that mind way down, even to utter Om, which is the highest truth we can know in this manifested world. You had to bring the mind all the way down to that. So let them be true or untrue. Don't worry about that. Even that's not the big thing. Words don't matter. What matters is the idea you have of yourself, for it blocks you. Give it up, right? Because the idea that you have of yourself, an idea is words that the mind uses to describe you. If you have an idea of yourself, you are already wrong. Why? Because that idea is being expressed in the tools of the mind: time, space, causation, past, present, future, subject, object, verb. And you are not any one of those. You are the entirety. So even to have, no matter what your thought of yourself is, it's wrong. It's a delusion. It's a misunderstanding. Because I wish we could take a field trip together to these places and just understand, you know, that the only way to know, to have any non-idea of what you are is to be fully present. Fully present means there's no thought, because you don't have time to create a thought in the present. The present's not big enough for a thought. The present is. And that in that isness, there's a silence, but it's the silence that your mind has created all the rest of this nonsense with. It's an infinite silence, a silence that's pregnant with the potential of everything at once. It's the Big Bang. It's the thing that exploded into that in the imagined one-time Big Bang that science talks about. It was exactly that. It was the moment that exploded into all of this, because the moment, right? The moment joined with memory. And once memory was there, there was future because of projection. So the Big Bang happened when the I am became the I am something, right? Manifested when the I am took on a narrative, took on a story. That infinitesimally small point of infinite potential of everything suddenly exploded into a world, into a whole narrative of life and being, you know, all of this. What are you supposed to do with all that? Give it up. That's what he says right here. Let everything out there be true or untrue, whatever. Words do not matter. The thoughts of your mind don't matter, because they can't be true, because they are already created by the nature of mind, right? With me and mind added to it. What matters is the idea you have of yourself. That's why the first question in Vedanta is, who are you? If you don't know who you are, you will never be able to make yourself happy. How can you make an unknown happy? All right? How can an unknown become content? You don't know what you're looking for. You don't know what you need. So you create an idea of yourself, and now you've got infinite possibilities. And that's what life has been. That's why we've been here so long. That's why this is how many lives have we gone through, because we're rummaging through an infinite box of possibilities of what will make something we don't know happy, right? So first, know who you are. First, find out what you are. Sit in an absolute silence and see what you are. Don't let the mind tell you. Don't let your neighbor tell you. Don't let me tell you. Don't let a book tell you. Don't let anyone tell you. Because if they're telling you, they're already lying because of those triads, those pesky triads. To tell you anything, they have to assume, subject, object, verb, past, present, future, right? Time, space, causation. And we know all those things are simply tools of mind to deal with God as separate, to deal with God as other. That's the only way they can carry on when they insist that the divine is other, that something that is a unity is at least a duality. And for most of us, there's much more than two going on. Right? So give it up. The questioner says, well, from early childhood, I was taught to think that I am limited to my name and my shape. A mere statement to the contrary will not erase that mental groove. Excellent point. That's the easiest and most fundamental description of samskara right there, right? The most fundamental description of samskara. I read in a, I really have to start getting some more ideas in my head to describe these things, but it was surprising to me one time that I read in a child psychology magazine in the library, back when you went to the library to look up something. And it said that a child does not know that his toes or her toes belong to themselves for 7 months, until month 7 in their development, right? And I sat there and I read that as a Vedantan, or from a Vedantic perspective, or thought about that later in my life from a Vedantic perspective. And I thought, wow, that means that this body isn't native to me, that I didn't think in terms of these bodies when I was born. I had to find my toes. I had to find my toes. I think about the funny thing, when did I get a gender? And how did I know? How did I know what my gender was, right? It was either an absence or a presence or something. I was like, oh, look at that. But you see, these aren't native to us. These are not who we are. This is not what we are. We had to grow into this and make up a story about it because it was very strange. We're like, what the hell is that? 10 little nubs hanging off of those limbs. What are those things? Look, they wiggle. What a crazy idea. Oh my gosh, they've got nails on them. These things are really alien. What kind of bug do I have? Oh, wait, they don't go away. This must be what I am, right? Just go through that whole process. Think of it in your mind and see how hilarious it is. As soon as we thought that we owned those toes, now we had to take care of them. Now we had to figure out what they were for, because we didn't know how to walk. That never occurred to us. At that point, I guess these toes are just kind of to hang in the air in front of me like a baby does and reach for them. Oh, that's what they're for. They're to play with. So find out who you are. Find out what you are. Take it all the way down to the essence, right? You can read it in a book. Certainly Ramakrishna tells you you are of the nature of love, wisdom, and being. You can take his word for it, but then you've always got that problem of authenticity. So you have to really sit there and know it for sure. You have to contemplate, go deep in your mind, or go down deeper than mind, and let it become obvious to you that the only 3 things that can apply to you are love, wisdom, and being. So from early childhood, I was taught to think that I'm limited to my name and shape. That's our fundamental problem. Your parents didn't do you a favor when they gave you your name. They didn't do you a favor when they, told you all of these things. Of course, what's the alternative? I don't know. It's another good thing to think about. A mere statement to the contrary is not going to erase the mental groove, right? No matter how many of these classes we have, no matter how much time we spend sitting here talking about these things, it's just words. These are just words. You have to do the work. What's the work? Sit with these things until they become obvious, right? Not as a belief, not as something that stays up here, like, think, oh, categorize. Oh, look, applying time, space, and causation to them. No, they're very interesting. Yes, it is all very interesting. But to be authentic, they have to come from you. And to come from you, you have to know what that is. What is you? What is unchanging in this experience? That's you. Do you know intimately within yourself right now? Can you let go and be the unchanging you? That thing that has borne your name for this whole life, even though your body has taken all different kinds of forms, you know?
We should
Can
have a
you?
retreat where no one has a name. It'd be great.
Yeah, well, that would be very interesting. A retreat where nothing is said or done. That would be fascinating. You know, when I was in college, I took a theater class, which was the best spiritual class I'd ever taken. That teacher really opened my spiritual life. I told you some of those experiences, but one of them was very much like that. One of our exercises was we were in a dark room. There was a little pillar in the middle of us. We stood in a circle, shoulder to shoulder. There was a little pillar, and on that pillar was a candle. And the candle next to the candle was a candle snuffer, and on the other side of the candle was a box of matches. And so he started off lighting the candle. We all stood there looking at the candle, and he says, "Okay," because now remember this is a theater class. So he says, "Okay, I want you, when it is time to do it, to go and snuff the candle out, and then take your place back in the circle. And then when it's time for you, go in and light that candle, and we'll just keep going back and forth like that." But he said, "I don't want any one of you to do this because you think you're supposed to do one or the other." He says, "I want you to feel this come from deep inside you. I don't want you to go in there and do this as a thing to be done. I want this to come from you, from the authentic you. And if it doesn't happen, I don't want you to move." Okay, now we sat there. We sat there. That class was a 3 hour class. It was a once a week class for 3 hours. I don't know how long we stood there, but more than half the class. We just stood there in silence at that candle. And some people lit it and some people put it out. And the fascinating thing about it was you could see the difference. You couldn't have described what the difference was, but you could tell when somebody just did it to do it to because they felt like they should, or that they whatever. There was a distinct difference between the person who just walked in there, either lit or put out the candle and then walked back without acting it. You know what I'm saying? Without acting, but doing it authentically. And we did that for a while. And fascinating class, because I eventually went in and lit the candle, but I knew I completely failed because I was doing it. I was doing it as a thing. It's like I just thought, well, I've been standing here for an hour. I got to do something. So I went in and did it. But the difference is so much. And this is what we're trying to do with our life. We're trying to stop acting because of a series of thinkings. We're trying to stop being motivated by a narrative and to start being inspired by what we are from the inside out, right? So that what we do is an unselfish act. And Vivekananda actually says, if you can perform a single, absolutely unselfish act in your life, you will realize God. That's what he says. If you can do that one time in your life, do a single act of absolute unselfishness, in that moment you will realize God. Because that will be the first time that you acted according to what you were and not what you thought you were. All right. Very, very, very beautiful ideal.
May I add something to that?
Oh, please.
It's Angela. I think anytime anybody does just an act of service, any
Mm-hmm.
kind of act of service, no matter how small or large, just to be of service, that gives you a glimpse, I think, of that. I mean, I've done a couple of those, and I can kind of begin to grasp what you just said, but it takes a long time to understand all the things you're saying.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, and that word "understand" is so misleading. But yes, to know. what we're saying, what we're talking about. And yes, you're absolutely right. Service is our practice. And we should, each time we serve, we should be aware that this is the ideal. Can I do this for no other reason than because it's what the isness of me, right? So it's not a thought process. It's not a calculation. It's not within time space causation. It's body heat, right? Right now, your body's at 98.6. Hopefully, I have no idea what mine is. I hope it's somewhere within that range, 98.6 degrees. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to do it. I don't have to. It's isness, right? There's no thoughts. There's no story in it. And so we want our service to be like body heat. There's no story in it. There's no thought process in it. It's the isness of our being. We finally know what we are, who we are in there. So that's what he says.
At the retreat, no one would have a name, and we wouldn't do anything for ourselves. So if someone wanted to do something for you, fine. Or you want to do something for somebody else, fine. But
oh God, yeah. See, I think that would be the only way it would really work, because I don't think I'm anywhere near the enlightenment where I can take care of a room full of people without a story happening somehow.
you could just throw them in a field out there and let them run.
But yeah, that would be a great one. To have a retreat, spend a weekend with 10 or 15 people and not do anything for yourself the weekend. You're not allowed to do a single thing for yourself.
Right.
Yeah, that would be amazing. We're gonna do that in May at the retreat. That's going to be an excellent. We won't do it for the whole weekend. We'll go crazy. But I think to spend a day like that. Okay, today the ideal is you can't do one thing for yourself. Right. So I want you all to brush each other's teeth. Okay.
Whatever.
We won't go to that extent, but outside of anyway. What a great idea! Thanks, Mark. That's beautiful, because that would be the ideal, and it'd be wonderful. You know, the story. It's one of those things I would call a preacher's story. About heaven and hell, that they're the exact same place, but in heaven, that they're the exact same place, but at the dinner table, everybody's forks, knives, and spoons are like 4 feet long, right? And in hell, everybody is emaciated and starving around the table because they can't reach their arms out far enough to let the fork get into their own mouth, right? So there's all this food and nobody can eat because the forks and knives are all too long. But in heaven, everybody's really fat and jovial because they're all just feeding each other, feeding the people across the table. So everybody's being fed perfectly fine. Right, so it's a wonderful metaphor for the same idea. Your body isn't meant to serve yourself. Your body is meant to serve the world through an expression of what's in it, pure love, pure being. Right. All right. So from early childhood, I was taught to think that I am limited to my name and shape. Right. A mere statement to the contrary is not going to erase that mental groove. A regular brainwashing is needed if at all it can be done, right? What is that regular brainwashing? I like that. It means two very things: brainwashing, which is a negative thing, but brainwashing, which is a very positive thing. The removal of me and mine is what has to be done. We have to wash our brain clean of this virus that's unnatural to it. It is unnatural to the mind of God, which is Brahman. It is unnatural for Brahman to have a thought of me and mine. And the insertion of that me and mine into Brahman, into the mind stuff of the divine, was the Big Bang. That was what happened. Me and mine was dumped into the infinite ocean of bliss, and explosion into this what we have. You call it, Maharaj, you call it brainwashing. I call it yoga. I call it yoga. Leveling up all the mental ruts, right? Going in. Oh God, I remember doing that. Oh my Lord, was that hard work? Lima at the Lima retreat every year. That was one of the things we had to do every spring after the rainy season, because all the roads were dirt roads. And so during the rainy season, they would get huge potholes and ruts and all that unevenness. That in the summer months when there was no rain, in San Francisco, there's literally no rain at all between May and October. And so all the ruts and all the potholes would harden up, right? And it would turn your car ride into a good horse gallop, bouncing all over the place. And so one of the things the monks had to do every year was go out with a shovel to the quarry and fill the back of the truck up, the dump truck up. And that itself was a ton of work with dirt, with gravel and dirt, right, manually. And then we'd go out and we would just drive along all of the roads, and two of the monks would be on the back on the truck shoveling the dirt off of the truck, and then the two would be on the road, leveling it out in all the potholes and all the ruts to level all the road out again. Huge amount of work. This is yoga. This is what we're doing exactly here, leveling up all the mental ruts. You must not be compelled to think the same thoughts again and again. Move on. All right. What is the same thoughts again and again? That's attachment, right? Because that's what we have to do in this world. We have to just keep thinking the same things over and over and over again, because nothing remains. Nothing fulfills us, right? You get drunk once, you're going to be sober. Run out there and get drunk again. That's the nature of this world. If being drunk offends you, you're hungry. Get hungry. Now you have to feed it. Well, you're going to be back again. I remember as a young man, that was my argument to my mother about how stupid it was for her to make me make my bed every morning. It's like, why am I going to make my bed? I'm just going to get in it again tonight. She just looked at me very sternly, make your bed. And that was that. So I can very proudly tell you that 60 years later, my bed is still made. You call it brainwashing, I call it yoga. Oh, it's 10 o'clock. I call it yoga, leveling up all the mental ruts. You must not be compelled to think the same thoughts again and again. Move on. The questioner says, well, easier said than done. Maharaj, don't be childish. Easier to change than to suffer. Grow out of your childishness. That's all. That's where we're going to stop for this morning.